Hello. Welcome once again to another episode of Non-Negotiable Self-Care. As we continue and journey through this best-selling book all about self-care, we are elated and excited tonight that we're going to be discussing self-care and the workplace. And we have two wonderful guests who are going to join us tonight to talk about self-care. As is customary, as before, we're just going to emphasize that self-care is the practice of taking deliberate action to preserve one's own health and wellness. Self-care means engaging in intentional, deliberate, focused activities or restraining from activities also concerning taking care of one's health and wellness. Self-care is the practice of giving ourselves the same grace, compassion, and care that we give to other people. So without further ado, we're going to get things started so we can talk about self-care and the workplace. So what I want to do first is introduce our first guest, and that is the person of Erica Jones. Erica Jones, BSN RN CIC, is a registered nurse, certified infection prevention practitioner. She has earned a BS degree in nursing from Coppin State College in 1998. After graduation, she began her career as a pediatric nurse. She's been working solely in infection prevention for the past 14 years. Erica is an active member of the Baltimore chapter of APIC, the Association for Practitioners in Infection Control. She's held various roles while serving the board. She is the immediate past president and is now serving as a diversity chair. In 2021, Erica received an Excellent in Nursing Award and was recognized as one of Baltimore's top nurses. In 2022, Erica was selected by APIC as a recipient of the Chapter Leader Award for her commitment and service in the field of infection prevention. She is married, has 3 sons, and a puppy. In her spare time, she enjoys gardening and baking. So, Erica, we want to welcome you to the Non-Negotiable Self-Care Book Tour. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listening audience, anyone that's viewing us via Facebook or YouTube that we might have left out about you?
Left out about me, I am a fellow polygrad.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely.
So it's my husband. He's also a polygrad. My sister's a polygrad. So
that's phenomenal.
Yep, family of polygrads. And I'm a proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated.
Okay. All right. That is definitely great stuff there. So I guess being a avid polygrad, I guess you're seeing the actual unintentional brand colors of the blue and orange.
I noticed it's on the book. Yeah, the book cover too.
for the very best high school in the world. The very best high school in the world. Now, thank you for joining us so much. And I learned something new today. Whole lineage of people from Poly, so it's great. Without further ado, we're going to introduce our next guest, this young man, Derek Fletcher. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for the Y in Central Maryland, where he leads the organization's efforts in strategic planning, partnerships, public policy, analysis, knowledge management, social responsibility, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2019, he was recognized by the Baltimore Business Journal as one of the city's top 40 executives under 40. Derek is also a 25-year-old radio veteran, and hosts a popular Sunday morning gospel music show on WEAA FM. He spends much of his time volunteering for worthy causes, including his local church, and he serves on multiple nonprofit boards, including Leadership Maryland, Project Jumpstart, and the Redeemed Family Life Center. Derek and his wife, Alexis, have 3 daughters. So we want to welcome Derek Fletcher to the Non-Negotiable Self-Care.
Hey, Dion. Hey, Erica.
Hey, Derek.
I wish I was still 25.
Well, 25-year-old veteran. 25-year-old veteran. Is there anything that we left?
I'm a 25-year veteran.
25-year veteran, correct? not a 25-year-old veteran, right?
I wish I was, though.
I'm sure. Is there anything that we left out that you would like to share with our listening audience about you?
No, I'm much less interested than Erica. But I was accepted to Poly. I didn't go though.
Okay.
Long story.
Yeah.
But I carry the parrots deep in my heart.
Awesome. That's all that matters. All that matters.
Poly pride, baby.
Absolutely. And as we proceed, and I'll say this periodically as we go along, anyone that wants to comment, ask a question, you should be able to do that. And then we will respond to you or try to get clarity or answer as we discuss the workplace and self-care. All right. So without further ado, you guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're going to just jump in and begin this discussion. So in general, when we think of the phrase, or you hear the phrase, and I know it's become very popular in the last year or so, self-care. What typically comes to your mind first when you hear the phrase self-care? What typically comes to your mind first?
I think for me, it's not all about bubble baths and pedicures. I've had a really stressful 2 years. I think we all have had a really stressful 2 years. But in my profession, it was my role to make sure that everybody was educated, safe, on board, with COVID. At this point for me, self-care is, have I eaten? Have I used the restroom? Have I just taken a moment to breathe? Because there were days where I couldn't even get from my office to the restroom. And I would have coworkers who would literally kind of, run interference and say, she's on her way to the restroom. You can't ask her any questions. She'll be right back. It was so bad that self-care simply became, oh my gosh, am I okay? It just was, just kind of a pulse check every couple of hours to make sure that I've eaten and that I'm okay. So it has changed, I think, in the past, for me, in the past 2 years, what self-care is.
Okay. So self-care is not just bubble baths and massages then, right? Yeah. However, aspects, I would say, aspects of self-care could include those things, correct?
Yes, and they do. But before I can even get to that point, just to make sure that mentally and emotionally, have I taken care of myself enough to be able to do my job? People are asking me questions all day long. Am I even at a place where I've had enough rest? There were days where I couldn't remember answers to simple questions because I was so exhausted. So self-care really, I think the definition probably changes depending on where you are. And it starts with a self-check. Am I okay? If I'm not okay, what do I need? And then you can start looking at what self-care, to me, what does that mean for you? And it's individual, I think, and not just individual, but it can change. So for me, self-care 3 years ago is very different than what it is for me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Fletcher, would you like to share anything about what comes to your mind for you when you hear the phrase self-care?
Yeah, when I think about self-care, I really think about taking responsibility and accountability to assure our own well-being, right? Like realizing that we are accountable for our own well-being. It's not, anybody else's responsibility to ensure that we are well, right? Like as adults, as responsible adults, it is our responsibility and our responsibility alone to ensure that we are well. And so I really think about the dimensions of well-being. I feel like it was, don't quote me on this, as I say it on something that's being recorded and broadcast on social media, but I think it's the University of Minnesota has the dimensions of well-being, right? And I think about like all of those facets of well-being that are so important to ensure that we are balanced and that we are well. And I think that, we have our responsibility to do whatever we need to do to ensure that, we're okay in all of those areas. So, as it relates to health and our own relationship and character and safety, and those sorts of things. And so, it shows up in all of the ways that Erica just said, but sometimes it shows up with just knowing when to hit the pause button, right? Like, and being self-aware enough to know what the indicators are that you've had enough and what you need to do to refuel, right? So, like, for instance, my Myers-Briggs type indicator suggests that I'm an introvert, which doesn't mean that I'm shy. It just means that being around people drains me, right? And unfortunately, I have to people for a living because I like to eat, and so do my kids. But at the end of the day, right, like, there comes a time where I am, I'm done peopling, and I need some time to isolate, to refuel and to recharge. And so, like, that's self-care for me, is being able to say no, like, enough of engaging folks.
Absolutely. And as one of my clients would often say, he would often say his social battery is drained.
Yeah, that's good.
It is. I use it. It's true. I also can identify by nature. I'm definitely pretty much an introvert. I have to do extroverted things, but I'm aware of my boundaries. And there are times when your social battery is drained from interacting with people, being social, interactive, where part of self-care is pausing to stop and say, I need some downtime. I need some alone time. I need some time just for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. We're forced to conform, unfortunately, to an extroverted normative society.
Yeah.
But if we're committed to self-care, we can set healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. When we talk about like self-care in the workplace and people in the world of work, and I've had a lot of clients who have struggles with working in working environments, companies, corporations, bosses, supervisors, entities, etc. Do you believe that people even think about the need to incorporate self-care into their workplace or world of work?
It really depends, right? Like, that's the scientific answer, is it depends. I'll tell you what's been really fascinating for me, and being in the role that I'm in now, where the diversity, equity, and inclusion team is a part of my division. I get to learn from, like, really bright equity clinicians every day. And one of the things that I've learned is that it often really depends on your lived experience, which is really connected to your dimensions of diversity. What you find is that folks who are from historically marginalized communities are far less likely to essentialize their own self-care because of the systems in society, of which they've had to traverse, to just survive, has kind of taught them, or has conditioned them, that they matter less. And so what you often see, particularly for women, or for individuals of color, or even some folks based on their generation, what you will see is that they often feel like they have to constantly take care of everyone else before they even consider what they need, and they feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel guilty for using their paid time off. They feel guilty for actually taking their lunch break or getting up to take a bio break, right? Like going to the bathroom. And so one of the things that one of my mentors, who was coaching me at one point, where all of that was really showing up for me, where not only based on my lived experience as a young Black male having to compete in a white dominated field in society, but also suffering like with my own imposter syndrome. Like, one of my mentors was like, hey, listen, I'm gonna challenge you. From now on, I want you to confront yourself and ask yourself, what would the average white male do? And that's what you need to give yourself permission to do. And when I looked around, I saw that my average white male colleagues are taking time in the middle of the day, 3 to 4 days a week, to go to the gym in the middle of the day and dare somebody to schedule the meeting during that time. Going to the golf course multiple times a week in the middle of the day and dare somebody to question what, what they're doing and all of the things. And here I am not eating lunch unless it's a lunch meeting. Like, that's crazy.
Absolutely.
I can totally relate. I think, I work in a hospital, and most of my colleagues are providing some sort of care to patients. And at that time, I worked at a pediatric hospital, and that in itself is stressful. Hearing about COVID, right? It was stressful, and having to help kind of calm those fears and keep yourself calm at the same time, while again not going to the ladies' room, not having your lunch, being exhausted, being bombarded with questions. I think I hit a breaking point. I hit a wall, and I was unable to even give anything. And at that time, I had to do a check. Okay, what is it that you need? The basics. Let's start with let's just eat a snack. Let's kind of start from there. But one of the things, and Dion actually came to speak to the group of infection preventionists. And I think there were probably 75 people on that call, and that was probably the most attended at that time. And it let me know that at that time they were all struggling with issues with stress, with burnout, with self-care. And Dion gave us some kind of like a pulse check, and he asked us, what are your coping mechanisms? Because there can be some good ones, there can be some bad ones, but you got to be honest with yourself. What are you doing? And a lot of people were drinking more after work. A lot of people were eating more out of stress. Some people weren't eating at all. And it was really interesting. I saw a lot of my colleagues either leave the profession. I saw a lot of colleagues retire. But we did a pulse check after that meeting, and a lot of people were very thankful for Dion coming, because no one had even talked to them. We always had speakers coming to talk about infectious diseases and data and statistics, but no one really coming in to say, hey, it is okay for the healthcare worker to take care of yourself too. There was a lot of caregiver burnout. There were a lot of, unfortunately, suicides for people in the healthcare profession during COVID because of that burnout of constantly giving and never taking a moment to check on yourself to see if you're okay. It is okay to take a break. At that point, I had over 350 leave hours banked because I wasn't taking a break. I wasn't taking a vacation. I was going. And that's my time. I take PTO now. I take breaks now. I take my lunch. One of the things, I think Dion might have even said it, schedule it on your schedule. My lunch break, schedule on your schedule. Erica's hour, planning hour, whatever you want to call it, so that when people go to put things on your calendar, it's already full, because I'm worth that hour so that I can give back 11 more hours to somebody else. And it was just really setting that precedent for others to say, I'm taking this break. I'm allowed to say no to you at this point, because if you don't ever say no to somebody else, you're saying yes to everyone, you're literally telling yourself no. No, I don't deserve time to myself. I don't deserve time to recharge, to take a break. And Erica tells herself yes now. So
that's awesome. And you both have just tapped into several areas I want to get to. Erica, during that time when I came to talk, it was virtual, so I had no idea it was that many people that I was talking to. I hadn't even, at that point, I hadn't even conceived of writing a book. But I noticed that year in particular, that's what I kept coming up for me, kept reinforcing self-care individually, with groups, organization, religiously and secular, kept having talks and discussions about self-care. And I think it all led to, the organized production of the book. And I'm glad that a lot of people were benefited and affected. And you and Derek made mention to something. One of the areas that employees often struggle with, and I hear this a lot in accessing their own self-care, is the aspect of two parts of what both of you mentioned: taking a break and utilizing their PTO. What are some of your thoughts about why people wrestle and struggle with this? Is this like their own individual guilt? Do you believe it's directives or consciously or unconsciously coming from people above them, or a combination of both? While people greatly wrestle with, I deserve and need to take a break, and I deserve and need to utilize my PTO. What's going on there with people in those two areas?
That is a good question.
You know, a lot of it is, I think sometimes we have to realize that we're not enslaved. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, seriously, it's like, Dr. Joy DeGroy, and, talks about like the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And it talks about like how, what was once like a coping mechanism has now become maladaptive. And it's like, you realize you're free, right? Like you have your papers, that you are allowed, like you don't need, your boss to give you permission to leave the plantation. Like, take care of yourself, come in from the field and rest. And I think a lot of that has really become ingrained, right? Like, into who we are. Because even think about it, like how we raise our kids, right? Like the reward systems, during our formative years, like, were established to reward us for being on task, right? Like, that's one of the things you learn in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. It's about following the schedule, being where you're supposed to be, not, deviating from, the directive that you were given. And so now here we are as like whole grown adults, and we still feel like we got to be on schedule. We got to be on task. We got to achieve. I need the sticker. I need to be recognized. I need to be validated. I got to get it done. And like I think that there's an opportunity there for us to really first of all, unlearn some of what we've been taught, and to disrupt some of those systems for our kids, to really raise them in environments that gives them permission to center their own well-being.
That's good. That's good.
I think for me, I pushed myself into that area, and I did more. And then it became a point where my supervisors expected that of me. And I felt that if I slowed down, then they would be disappointed, because I had been working at this level for so long. And that if I did anything less, took breaks, slowed down, then I wasn't working up to my full potential. And there's nothing, I don't know. I think at one point my husband said to me, it doesn't matter all the work that you're doing if you're not here tomorrow. So he also said, and you got to remember to find balance. And at home, he was picking up the slack for me. Now, when COVID first started, I needed to be there, and that was normal, but it wasn't normal after 2 years. And so when I'm giving elsewhere, I come home, I don't have anything left. And I remember on a marriage retreat, one of the ladies there said to me, do not forget your first ministry. And that is take care of home. You take care of home, and then you can do the rest. And I remember saying to my supervisor, I work to support home. Home isn't my support for work, if that makes any sense.
That's really
I'm
good.
not, you know what I mean? They do support me in working, but I have to remember my order, and things got out of order. And when things got out of order, I worked more and more, and I was neglecting what I should have been doing at home, which was taking care of my family and taking care of myself. So it became a hamster wheel, and it was just going faster and faster and faster. And either I was going to die on that hamster wheel or fly off of it. So I chose to get off the hamster wheel.
I had a manager who once told me, like, when you die, you don't want your tombstone to say he was a great boss, right? Like, or, he was this great person at work. Like, you think about like the things that one of your tombstone, wife, mom, husband, father, whatever. And it's like, those are the people that matter most.
Absolutely, for sure. Sometimes people along those lines, two things. When we talk about taking a break, right? I think, Erica, when I talked with the group, because I remember getting some questions and people, and I've gotten this question individually from clients as well as groups that I talk to. I generally, for therapeutic benefit, encourage people to get outside of their work environment to take their break. sometimes people in workplace settings are guilted into staying in the office, staying on the unit, just go to this little cubicle. But even if you're just in, still on the unit and you're eating your lunch, your mind and emotions are still wrapped up in work. So a lot of times I do encourage people to actually get outside of the environment, to take a break, even if it's taking your food and going into your car, a garage area, somewhere, just a distance from that normal work environment. That little break can serve as a strong refresher. Because I remember a number of the infection control individuals during that time, they were like, "Oh, we're so busy. We can't.
Mhm.
Right? Am I right? That's what they
You're
said.
correct.
Man,
At 12 o'clock was the only open slot on our calendar. So they started scheduling 12 o'clock meetings because that was the only time that we actually had to sit down and have another meeting. And so we never had a break. And with Zoom meetings
mm,
and virtual meetings, it's not like you're walking to a different place and you can actually stop and go to the restroom or go get something to drink. You're literally ending one meeting and starting the next. And you're literally on that screen from the time you walk in the door until the time that you leave on some days. And they're expecting you get out on the units, talk to the staff, and it's like, well, I don't even have a moment. But the Zoom meetings made it even harder to get just a
sure.
few minutes of your own time because, like I said, you hit end and you hit start and you're back into another meeting again. It was nonstop.
And I think one of the things I've seen with both of you, at least now, I don't know how it was for 2020 because the world was shut down. Not too many people were moving around. So I guess people who work for companies and entities where they accumulate PTO, I guess that PTO was just accumulating, I guess, during 2020. But both of you seem to take advantage of time away from your duties, roles, responsibilities from posts that I've seen. You both will go away, travel, etc. How important? How important? You both know you see all of my posts. I'm definitely traveling. But how? Even before I was working for myself, how important? How important is vacation time and utilizing that time off? How important, whether you do a staycation or you fly somewhere domestically or internationally, how important is that vacation time to to people in the workplace as far as a refresh and a reset? How important is that?
Oh my gosh. It's essential. It's essential, like, to step away from your environment and to rest, right? Like, we have to do that. And so, like, it's that principle is even biblical, right? Like, David talked about in the 23rd Psalm, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. There's nothing about the rest of that chapter that's in green pastures. The green pastures was a retreat, right? Like, it was away from the rest of the environment, and we just need that. Like, I'm about to go on vacation right after this. Dion, when you first invited me to do this, I said, that's gonna be
Remember,
around the time I'm on vacation. I got to see. Literally, while we've been on having this discussion, I just got an email from my boss, and then he just texted me like, I need you to look at my email. He needs me to cover a meeting at the White House next week. Now, I'm on PTO. The old me would be like, oh, well, like, it's the White House, right? Like, we got to figure this out. I'm going to see Joseph Robinette Biden. New me is like, sorry, I'm going to be on a beach somewhere, like, having a good time. And I won't be thinking about work. Somebody else can go to the White House.
and what you just did, that's a very important part of self-care. With that, you're making yourself the priority,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and your wife
Yeah.
the priority.
Absolutely. I mean, if we don't do that, we become a well without water, and
Mm,
we have literally nothing left to give, right? And so, Erica, you're talking, you sharing the journey for you and your colleagues about how you had to give yourself permission to, to center your own self-care and essentialize that. I mean, if we don't all get learning from that, then I don't know what can. Like, your work is literally a matter of life and death. And so if you can find a way in there to still, like, give yourself permission to take care of you because you realize, one, you deserve it, period. Like, even before we even talk about how you can be the best for everybody else, but just because you're enough and your self-care matters, my work is not nearly as important as yours. Like, ain't nobody dying. I'm not preventing folks from dying. And so if Erica and Erica's colleagues can give themselves permission to take their PTO and to go to the bathroom and all of those things, like why can't I?
Absolutely.
I think when you get away, well, I think let's start this way. I think if you don't get away, it feels like work is all there is. When you step away, you broaden that perspective. Same thing with traveling. If you get out of and you don't have to leave the country, you can just go to another community. You broaden your perspective and you think differently. And then when you come back in, you have different experiences. I took a vacation in December and it was kind of a last minute trip. I went with one of my friends and we went on a kind of a last minute cruise. And we rode bumper cars. We really did. We had fun. And I came back to work and everybody kept staring at me. They're like, you're so different. And I'm like, I slept. I ate what I wanted to eat. I had a good time. I went to the beach and I slept. And I'm literally skipping through the halls and everybody's like, oh. And I'm like, you should try it too. It works. You might not be able to get away, get out of town. Staycations are great. I like gardening, go outside, get outside. But if you never leave the office, if you never leave your job, that becomes your entire world and it starts to change and reshape your perspective. And you literally think this is all there is when there's so much more than that.
Absolutely. That is definitely true and awesome. And again, we want to say to our listening audience, we see a few people logged in through Facebook and YouTube. Feel free to ask a question or make a comment and we'll respond to you as we go along, as we go forward. So it is very important for that whole refresh. I sometimes have clients who tell me they've never taken a vacation ever. And obviously that becomes a part of our therapeutic work because now more than ever, with the bestseller, and you can order the book right here. This is one of the sections in the book, the workplace and self-care, with a whole bunch of other areas. But now, as a self-care expert, I certainly continue to talk in a more pronounced way with my one-on-one clients about their own self-care. So in that sense, there are people who accumulate a bunch of paid time off and they struggle. Like my people will struggle and say, well, my place of employment needs you. And I'm like, okay, they may need you, but you need you too. You need you too. So you need to, take time. They'll be there. You know this. You both know this. These companies and corporations will exist whether you're there or not in some sort of way or capacity. They will be there. Take care of yourself first. You both.
Do they really need us? Like, do they really?
Probably not. But that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Good question.
Yeah. Someone put that in perspective for me. I had a colleague, we actually shared the role, and he passed away suddenly several years ago. And I quickly assumed his responsibilities. And someone said to me very recently, well, what happened when he passed away? And I said, well, I assumed his duties. And they said, if you pass away from stress or stress-related issues, which is what happened to him, someone will quickly take on your responsibilities. It's going to keep going. This building was here before you got here. It's going to be here after you're gone. You're just kind of a blip in time. And so you have to take the time for yourself. You have to start recognizing those stress points, those trigger points, those when you're headed in a very negative direction. A lot of people don't even recognize it when they start. And sometimes they recognize it too late. They end up with chronic health issues. They end up with depression. They end up, with codependencies, addictions and things. And I think, sadly, people don't stop enough to just check on themselves before they even get to the point where it's hard for them to return. Yeah. It's essential. It's essential.
It is. Absolutely. Let's see. Concerning people working, and one of the things people wrestle and struggle with, feeling like it's going to affect them negatively if they take breaks or vacations or etc. But can a lack of significant self-care in the workplace settings, can that also impact and affect one's level of productivity at work? Yeah. So maybe even some of the people who present to work because their self-care is so low or bad, it may start manifesting in their behaviors, in mood, aggression, etc. But what do you got? Have you seen situations like this?
Absolutely. I mean, your brain is just not sharp. Some of the most productive companies have figured out, not because of their social responsibility, right? Like to be an equitable, caring employee, but because of wanting to be sustainable, right? Like and increase profit margins, have figured this whole thing out, right? Like if we meet the needs, right? Like if we just at a basic level, right? Like thinking about just Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we just meet the needs of our employees and safety, secure, like all, like if we just meet their needs, they're going to churn out more widgets that are going to be better, and they will churn them out faster. And so that's why you see a lot of companies that are targeting particularly like the younger generation of professionals. They will allow them to have these crazy flexible work from home schedules, or if they do have to come in, they have like free snacks and napping pods and like ping pong and all of these things, because it's like people have realized that folks are more productive, they have better mental clarity, they are sharper, and they just overall just more effective when they're rested and when they're balanced and when they're well.
I remember sitting in a meeting. I think we were going on close to 3 hours, and no one was stopping, no one was taking a break. And I looked around and I said, "You all aren't hungry? No one has to go to the bathroom?" And I don't know if that's all I think about is eating and going to the bathroom. But I'm like, no one wants to take a break. I mentally can't process another thing. And I walked out. And when I came back, everybody kind of laughed and they're like, "Well, you said what we were all thinking, but we were afraid to just kind of get up." I said, "This is insane. I think the adult brain is supposed to stop every 45 to 50 minutes because you just can't take on anymore. You cannot take on anymore." I think in high school, when you had 50-minute classes, that's because the human brain needs a break. So you've got to process all that. So for 3 hours, I still don't even know what we talked about because I had no time to process it. It's just that's just not healthy. It, it's just not healthy.
And probably in that sort of setting and environment, in some workplace settings, somebody has kind of instituted some sort of culture of fear, where people are fearful or afraid. I'm hungry, I got to go to the bathroom, and that's unfortunate.
Mhm.
They're just like,
Yeah, I mean, just that's silly. Like, I mean, it is like some of that just needs to be disrupted, right? Like these are, we need to see them for what they are. They are systems of oppression.
they
Like
are.
we need to disrupt these systems, unlearn these norms, and normalize setting boundaries. Like how sad is it, right, that we got to send people to a training class to teach them how to give themselves permission to set a boundary so that they can go to the bathroom when they have to pee. Like, I mean,
Correct.
like we teach our kids this when we're potty training them. Like, when you gotta go, you don't just sit there. You get up and go.
Absolutely, you're right. Systems, and that's important because sometimes people are wrestling against either conscious or unconscious systems of oppression versus their need for their own self-care. And there may be a fear, I don't want to say this, I don't want to do this, and maybe not to these examples, but it could be other things, because maybe that's been instituted. True story. Speaking of poly, Erica, one of my poly friends on the West Coast, who I saw years ago on one of my trips, I won't say where in case this video goes around, but um, contacted me and had a work related situation where, for their own self-care, they were during their lunchtime and break, part of their own self-care, the type of work they do and the stress, they were getting in a workout in between. But there was a memo that went around and discussions because the management there, because of the busyness of the clinic, blah 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 blah, the management there was strongly encouraging all of the workers to not leave off of the unit and to take their lunch break on the unit. Now, he had some other personal things going on, but he called me because he started having increased anxiety as a result of that, because that was a part of his self-care toolbox. And one of the things I had to reinforce within him is that no, if that's a part of, you're working this amount of hours, that's a part of your work related self-care regimen. You have the right to, it wasn't like a straightforward directive, but it was like, we don't really want you to. We may treat you bad or shady if you leave and take your break. So, I said, no, you have the right, if that is working for you. That's a part of your self-care toolbox, your regiment, that you need to leave. It's your lunch hour, so you have the right to fight for that. Yeah. And so people, and that's a different type of example, but these systems of oppression versus my self-care. So that's where he was. And he called me because he knows what I do, and he wanted to get clarity about his thoughts and how he felt. And I said, no, you're right. You have the right to feel what you feel. Stand up for yourself if that's what you need. And he has some personal things going on in his life, and it was going to be too much stress overload for him. So I encouraged him to fight for his right to leave to take his break.
Absolutely.
That's a real example.
I mean, but I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, to even think that it's remotely okay to ask folks to do that. That's just incredible, right? Like, the audacity.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I learned when I worked in a number of hospitals and centers and et cetera, we would have professional development from time to time. And one of the things that always came up was the importance of, and people feel a lot of different ways about this, but the importance of trying to develop some sort of relationship with someone at work, where you develop a best friend. Now, I've had clients tell me things like, yeah, no, I just go to work. They're not my friends. I don't care about them. I just want to go to work, go home. Then I have had clients who develop very strong connections with people at work. This is one thing I put in the book. How essential do you guys believe or not believe that cultivating supportive relationships and interactions with coworkers, how important is that to one's self-care? Do people possibly benefit from a best?
So there's actual science, right? Like, to support this. So Gallup, who does a lot of testing around workplace engagement for employees, on their employee satisfaction survey that they send out for companies who hire them, they will ask, like, that's one of the questions that's asked is, do I have a best friend at work? And that's because research suggests that folks who have someone who they consider to be their best friend at work is more than twice as likely to be engaged than folks who say otherwise.
Yeah.
I think as people, we need to connect, whether it's family, friends, at work. I think it's just a part of being human. I have a really good work friend who we just kind of go in each other. We have a code word. During the pandemic, I got really stressed out, and I was a department of one. And as a joke, someone gave me a volleyball. His name was Wilson, and the code word was, if you have gone a little too far off your rocker, we just yell Wilson. And that was kind of our joke. And in the middle of stressful, crazy meetings, I'd be like, Wilson. And we would crack up, and it would just kind of break the day up. It just was kind of our fun humor. But I think when you are dealing with a lot of crazy stress at work, and someone who understands the crazy stress, just to be able to vent to them or go to them and say, am I crazy? Did I say something crazy today? Why is everybody looking at me crazy? Did I do something wrong? Just so that they can say, yeah, you're crazy. Or just to be a person to be able to vent to, or just to be able to sit there and just go, whoo, you get it. Because a lot of times, even though we might talk to our partners or spouses or family members, if you're not in that environment, you don't always get it. And you do spend a lot of time at work. You spend a large portion of your day. So if you go to work and you only go there to do your work, it's miserable because it's not just about work. It's also about friendships and relationships and getting along with others and learning and growing. Because how can you learn and grow if you kind of stay in your tunnel and just go to think you're just going to do your work? You can't grow. You can't bounce ideas off of each other either. So I think those relationships can help make you better. If you find a healthy relationship, it can help make you better. And a lot of times other people recognize, Erica, you kind of snapped at a whole lot of people at that meeting. I think you need a break.
Absolutely.
Someone that you trust that can say to you, calm down, take a step back.
I love it. I love all of the feedback that both of you gave. What Derek shared about the Gallup study, that is true. It is beneficial and it's healthy for people mentally and emotionally. I like that Wilson example. I think I may have to incorporate it at some point somewhere where I do stuff at, because it does send a message to other people that are connected to you to let you know. And Erica, like you said as well, other people being able to say, something's going on with you, you snapped. That's where those supportive relationships come into play, because obviously you don't let everybody in your inner circle at work or everybody close to you or everyone get to know you, but you have your people. And so they know when Erica or when Derek is about to go off, right?
I've been saved so many times by by the circle and by the community, because you're right, they know. And most of the time for me is when things are always stressful at work, but when things are stressful and I'm hungry, not a good look. And so I know it's really bad. Like when one of my people, like when they like lean in and be like, "Did you eat today?" And I'm like, "Oh man, like got it." So no, let me, go get a protein bar and calm down and go for a walk.
Yeah, stressed and hungry, not a bad combination. Not a good combination for you. Huh?
I wonder, though, there were a lot of people during the pandemic that were working from home. How many people would not have been as depressed or have had so many issues had they just gone to work and someone said, "You okay?
Wow.
You need to talk." I think a lot of people were so isolated and there was nobody to check on them.
We were not made to be alone.
We're not.
No,
I think that's an excellent point. Because a lot of people concerning the workplace, one of the things I shared with a lot of people, when the world was shut down and people had to work from home, whether you were single, married with kids, etc., home became everything. There was no escape. And what do I mean by that? Home became home. Home became work. Home became the gym for like 4 months. Home became church. So there was no change in environments. And so in the mental health field, for example, we saw I'm single, both of you are married. I think you're married too, Erica, right? Okay, both of you are married. We saw a surge in domestic violence. Why? Because many couples suddenly were forced to see each other, interact with each other all the time. So if couples had a little bit of issues, it would magnify and intense. If couples had tremendous issues already, but they had the ability to leave the house, leave the environment, go be distanced from each other for 8 hours and then tolerate each other. It just depends upon where the relationship was before the world was shut down. Many single people did struggle with levels of isolation and depression and loneliness because they had to work from home and work alone and there was nobody there. Some married people struggled with depression and isolation because they had to work from home and they didn't like the people who were at home all the time with them 24 hours. This is real stuff that happened, and just, it was a lot.
It was a whole lot, right? And so like when you think about people losing that best friend that they likely have at work or their circle and their community, to Erica's prior point, these folks that they are used to spending majority of their waking hours with, and now I got to be awake with the people that I'm just used to sleeping beside. Like that, it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world.
Absolutely. I actually only have a few more questions that I really want to get to because we covered a number of the things that I wanted to ask about. But one of the things that I mentioned in the book has to deal with looking at people's inner dialogue, their internal messages that come up within themselves in reference to work. So some people, when we're talking about work and whatever they do and their effectiveness and productivity, they struggle with an inner monologue about themselves that criticizes them. There's aspects of this, and we encourage people to monitor their inner critic in the book. In psychotherapy, we look at the connection between thoughts, feelings, behaviors, etc. So you look at someone in a work setting, and he or she is they're being paralyzed in their self-care, and maybe their coworkers, boss, or supervisors might not even know they're being paralyzed in their self-care because inside themselves, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, inside themselves, they have this running negative internal dialogue about themselves, and they're not good enough, they're not productive enough, they're not as smart as their other coworkers, they're not doing enough work, etc. Both of you have or do work in leadership and management positions. What would you do in those sort of situations if you found out that someone under you is dealing with those sort of internal thoughts or questions about themselves, their productivity, their self-esteem and self-care is lacking? Well, how would you probably handle that? I changed how I wanted to present the question, just FYI.
I had a coworker once who burned out, exhausted, and I could just see it every day she came to work. She's literally dragging herself into the building, and I noticed it, and I said, "What is going on?" And she said, "I'm just not doing enough. I'm failing. I'm failing at everything." And I said, "Well, what is it that you haven't done that you're trying to do?" And she has this huge list of things that she has not done. And I said, "All right, let's take a step back. Now, tell me what you did when you walked in." "Oh, I did this and I did that." And we listed them out. And I'm a checklist person. I love checklists. Everything that I wrote down, I put a check next to it. And by the time we got done with the list, I said, "You've been here 4 hours and you've done 8 things already. Stop looking at what you haven't done. Look at what you have done." And she kind of looked at me and she said, "Well, all I see is the to-do list." And I said, I do the same thing. I said, "But we can't accomplish 25, 30 things a day." I had a supervisor who literally kind of taught me that same lesson. She said, "You are so overwhelmed. Let's start with your list." She said, "What do you have to do today?" By the time I was done, I said, "There's 16 items." And she laughed and she said, "As your boss, you only have to do 3." I'm telling you, I'm giving you permission to slow down. Do 3. If you do more than that, great. Check those off and move on. I think that inner voice, I had it, my coworker had it. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I only see what I have left to do. It can make or break you. If you don't turn that inner voice around to think about the good things that you've done, the good things that you've contributed to. I'm not saying that there's never room for improvement, because there is. But if we always focus on what's left to do or what we haven't done right, we won't accomplish anything, and we won't even see the good that we have done. So that inner voice is major, major.
I actually had a similar situation recently with one of with a colleague, with someone who was actually on my team, and I ultimately referred them to EAP, to the Employee Assistance Program, to take advantage of some free therapy sessions. And I said to her, "You are enough, and I know that, and I see that, and your team sees it, and your colleagues see it, but until you see it, right, like, it really doesn't matter." Because what it really boils down to at the end of the day is that we essentialize what we believe is a priority. And if we don't think that we're enough of a priority, we'll move ourselves down on the list. And what is often at the root of this driving inner thought, an inner voice, right? Like that we have to do more, that we have to achieve more, is really feeling this burden to prove that we deserve to be where we are. And when the reality is, right, like statistically speaking, based on, you know, how folks are cast and marginalized in this country, based on the skin you're in, you probably deserve to be where you are a long time ago, and you've had to work twice as hard to get here and make a whole lot less, probably compared to other folks that don't look like you. So, you know, you've got to believe that you've earned your seat and that you deserve to be here, and that, you know, you have to make yourself a priority to be a wise steward of the resource that you are.
Thank you. Love it. Absolutely. You know, and a lot of people don't. Sometimes people are afraid and fearful to go to EAP because it's kind of, you know, somewhat connected to work. But you know, most places of employment have some sort of EAP connection where people can get 3 to 6 sessions of free therapy, usually centered around work and stress and tension and anxiety, maybe how it's affecting work. But you know, if there's more and more needed after that, they will refer people to a clinician in the community. But I think that that's great to emphasize what you emphasize with that coworker, that they're more than enough. There's a number of other ways for people to incorporate self-care into your workplace, to weave it in, that we do discuss in the book. We did talk about some of those aspects already tonight. We are at our time. This was a very, very good discussion and dialogue. I want to thank you both for joining us to have this discussion about the workplace and self-care. Any two things I'll ask for both of you. For our listening audience, for those that will view us later tonight, tomorrow, or on YouTube, my channel, this will be permanently stored on my YouTube channel. So when I become famous, someone will see your faces on my channel at some point. So with that being said, I'm going to ask you both two things to give us, three things. Once we end, I'm going to ask you to stay on for a moment. But the other two things, I'm going to ask you both to give our listening audience any parting words or guidance about self-care in the workplace, and then to let everyone know how they can reach out to you or connect with you if you would like them to do that. So any parting words for our listening audience about self-care in the workplace, and how they can connect and reach out to you. And so Erica will be ladies first.
Okay. I'm going to speak for me personally because I think I struggled with speaking up when I needed to take a break. Speak up. Let your supervisor know, I need some time. I need a break. If you have PTO, use it. If you're not going to travel, do a staycation. Do things that you love at home. Get away. Take time for yourself because you deserve it. You will be a better person, a better worker, a better friend, just better in general. You deserve that time. Do not allow yourself to get to the point where you can't even help yourself anymore. And it is okay to ask for help. It is okay to seek professional help. If you have friends, that's great, but sometimes friends can't help you. If you're spiritual, pray, go into a place where you can learn more about yourself, ask yourself those deep questions. Am I okay? Just start with, am I okay? But if you need help, seek professional help because they can help you figure out things that you didn't even know about yourself and give you tools and coping mechanisms because it's one you. It's one you. And take care of you. Take care of you.
And how can people connect with you if they want to, if you want them to?
My email. So I don't know if I just share it here or is it go in a chat box? But
We both.
Yeah, it's a Miss E Jones 317 at gmail.com. Email me. I'm transparent about my experiences. I'm transparent about my breakdown. When I hit the brick wall, I will talk openly about that. But we have to take care of ourselves. We get one life. We get one chance at this thing, and we need to enjoy it and make the best of it while we are here. And we can't do that if we have burned ourselves out working to a standard that is probably not even attainable, honestly.
Okay, give us that email address again.
Okay, it's Miss MISSE Jones 317 at gmail.com.
Thank you so much. Fletcher?
Yeah, snaps for everything Erica said, ditto. The only thing I would add to that is my personal learning that taking care of myself is a way that I honor God, right? Like, based on my faith and my systems of belief, I believe that my body is the temple of God, and that I exist in the earth ultimately to do his work. And so taking care of myself, and that includes my physical body, but as well as my mental, my emotional, my spiritual well-being, right? Like, that is taking care of God's temple. And that if I run myself into the ground, like, ultimately I am dishonoring God. And so, right, like, not only do I exist to do his will and his work and all of those things, but also, he said I'm pretty dope, right? And that I'm enough and I'm worth it. And so, like, who am I to disagree with that?
Awesome. I like what you said. So basically, investing in your own self-care. I've gotten so much great stuff since I've started this book tour that I could have put in my book. So I guess
Part two.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at all of these and grab, because it's been some right. There's gonna need to be. How can people connect with you or reach out to you?
I'm on most social media platforms at Derek Fletcher. My Derek is spelled funky. It's with a Y. DERRYCK Fletcher. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram primarily. Would love to connect with you.
All right. Thank you. All social media. Yep. Thank you both for your time and for sharing, with our listening audience. This has been really, really great. And we want to thank everyone else for tuning in to another episode of Non-Negotiable Self-Care. We're going to take a break next week, but then the following week, we'll have another segment dealing with self-care and the elderly. So we'll take a break next week, but then we'll have following week, we'll be dealing with self-care and the elderly. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, and encourage everyone to have a restful night. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.